What up, y'all? Can't overdo it. Here, I'm going to be ranking every piece of media that I consumed in the month of February of 2025, and I got through a good chunk this month. The goal this time was quantity, and I think that shows based on Honkai and Project Moon taking up more than half of this list. And also, the quality of these entries are actually fairly consistent. There's not a big gap between any of the spots, which made it pretty hard to rank, but I'm going to do it anyways. The worst piece of media I consumed this month was the Durandal visual novel at the start of Honkai Impact 3rd First Part Phase 2 Second Half. I use a reading guide, courtesy of Hoyo Stands, for a read order of HI3, and I plan to keep sticking to it, even though I seem to have a habit of getting stuck on the visual novels. I'm not going to get into the anti-entropy visual novel here, but I did start this Durandal one in August last year, and I got from chapter 9 all the way to 31 in like 2 or 3 days in February. So then obviously RIP, this was bad, it took so long to get through, but the reality is that I just had other stuff I wanted to read instead. In any case, I did like the story here. Bianca and Rita's dynamic in particular was really good. I would even go so far as to say that Rita was my favorite character in it, outshining Bianca, who's supposed to be the star. But with that being said, Bianca peaked at the very end, so the gap between the two was actually not very large. I did like the story. I did like the characters. However, there is one massive fucking issue that I took with this visual novel. Okay, this visual novel should not have been called Durandal. No, it might as well be a fucking philosophy textbook. Here's the thing. I like philosophy. Genuinely, it is one of my favorite subjects. Learning different ideas and ideals and ways to think is very interesting to me, and I find it pretty damn intriguing. It's significantly less intriguing when characters regurgitate the exact same idea over and over again, sprucing up their words as if I'm too dumb to notice. I'm not. They say the exact same thing over and over and over, like, yes, I got it the first time. The idea that no one person can truly, at their core, objectively conclude that others have their own conscious, since, others' consciences can't be observed by the self, is something I got. I get it, I understand it, cool beans. What is not cool beans is that they spout this to you multiple times in the same conversation, repeatedly. And now, obviously, this is just one example. It does happen a few times, but when it's noticeable, you're literally just reading a textbook. I know I sound negative right now, but I needed to talk about this. All in all, I did like the visual novel as a whole package. I think that the last few chapters really carried it, and I think it was chapter 30 was really great. The moment with Bianca, if you've read it, you probably know what I'm talking about, was amazing. And the very last scene of the final chapter was absolute cinema. The rest of the final chapter was super mid. I did not fuck with it. But the very last scene with Rita and Bianca, peak. It's worth it. You gotta read it so that you can get to that scene, bro. I'm telling you. Moving up ever so slightly in the world, I have Leviathan from Project Moon, a webcomic with 11 chapters that is then continued in a web novel form for chapters 12 through 20, because the webcomic was cut short for whatever reason. It's essentially a backstory for Virgilius and Charon from Limbus Company. Firstly, if you do plan to read this, do it after finishing Lobotomy Corp and Library of Ruina. And other than that, probably do at least the prologue of Limbus Company so that you know who these two characters are. I personally read this after finishing the first two cantos in Limbus, just for reference. Garnet's story throughout this was pretty compelling. He was definitely a pretty standout character. It's just kind of a damn shame that he exists in Project Moon, because there are just so many fucking amazing characters in there. Virgilius, though, is the reason to read this, really. My favorite chapter, personally, was the very last one because of two particular characters who made a guest appearance, both of which are peak. I liked the whole concept of the glass, and seeing how it ties into the in-game IDs was really cool as well. But, I mean, outside of the aforementioned peak characters in the last chapter, one being deserving of the title of peak, and the other one being my potential goat of Limbus Company, I found the narrative mostly just fine, to be honest. The webcomic was weaker narratively, and whilst it wasn't an issue for me, the last few chapters of the web novel are machine translated, which is a shame because that's where the best content of the story is. In any case, it was good. It did a good job of humanizing Virgilius, if you're interested in him as a character, and his relation to Charon. I recommend checking this out for sure. Moving over to number 10, I have Chapter 18 of Honkai Impact 3rd, From Beds of Everlasting Snow. This is going to be very quick, and you'll see why in a minute. Owl's introduction was cool. Durandal and Rita are cool. Raiden Mei is cool. Raven is cool. That's it. Over to number 9, who would have thought it's basically part 2. I have Chapter 19 of Honkai Impact 3rd, Into Earth Does the Water Flow. Al and Anna's dynamic got some more spotlight here, and ironically, in talking about Al, he reminds me a bit of Garnet from Leviathan. This character who is interesting in their own right, doomed to a tragic fate, given the narrative they're a part of, and it's a damn shame that they're not higher on my list because of how many amazing fucking characters exist in Honkai. It was good stuff. It was a nice little mini arc that they did here, but the next arc, the Fuhua stuff, seems to be where the peak truly starts, so await my thoughts on that, I guess. Hopefully I'll get there in March. Moving up to number 8, sticking with Honkai Project Moon, I have Kanto 2 from Limbus Company. This canto centered around the gorgeous Rodion, or Rhodia if you prefer, and honestly, my thoughts on this canto are pretty simple. It generally had a less serious tone than Canto 1, it was more consistent than Canto 1, and I honestly probably enjoyed it a little bit more, but that's probably just due to the fact that I enjoy Rodion as a character in general, but I digress. This was pretty enjoyable, pretty consistently enjoyable, and from those I've talked to, this is supposedly the worst canto, and yet I still liked it a lot, so I'm definitely looking forward to the others if this is the worst Project Moon has to offer. And now, at number 7, the best canto in all of Limbus Company, if you've only played the first 2, I have Canto 1. Gregor's story here was just really cool. I enjoyed him a lot, and in particular, I enjoyed his dynamic with Yuri. I think that seeing how these cantos interact with the classic stories they're based on would be very interesting if I cared enough to go and read those stories, such as Kafka's Metamorphosis or Crime and Punishment for the Rodion canto, but I don't really plan to read all of them. There's a few that I might read, but I'm not going to get into it right now. The point kind of ends up falling on deaf ears because of that, but regardless, I really like the idea of the cantos, and I'm going to be starting Canto 3 tomorrow at the time of this recording. So definitely expect to see more cantos in the future on these videos. At number 6, finally breaking the trend, I have My Side, and this was honestly about what I expected it to be. I managed to go into this with little to no spoilers, and it was a really cool experience. It reminded me of how absolutely awful I am at solo horror games because, brother, I got fucking scared of Anime Waifu Simulator. Do not put me in an actual solo horror game. I will not survive. I liked the execution of the concept here, and although I'm not personally in love with it, having all the different metas and being able to interact with them all is really cool. But, I mean, this is just kind of bargain bin Monica, to be honest. So, take that for what you will. Anyways, I need to get into the important stuff. Here is the thing, guys. Cappy is cool. But she is not the best Mita because short-haired Mita is the GOAT. I will not entertain any naysayers. She is criminally underrated. Y'all just got whack taste. Probably the most obscure pick on this list, at number 5, I have a visual novel on Steam called The Non-Existence of You and Me. You like existentialism? You like meta-narratives? You like anime girl? Congrats, this is for you. I had a lot of fun with this. It didn't shy away from making fun of itself, and there was a song in the middle of it that was really fucking cool and just fun to listen to. I enjoyed going through all of the different endings and getting 100% achievement on it. And all in all, it's a cool read, and the best part, it's short. Like, pretty damn short, so I can pretty safely recommend it. Over to the top 4, I have Honkai Star Rail 3.0. The start of Amphorius, and damn, yeah, this quest was longer than I thought it would be. I'm not saying that it's inherently bad to be long, but this was like long. I'm gonna be so real here. There are complaints about Honkai Star Rail and how the characters be yapping a lot. So much so that the devs added a feature to circumvent this But then some people got mad because why play story game if skip story? But here's the thing: the skip button is not necessary. If you like the story, just do the story, and if you don't, then hit that button. It literally does not affect you. Anyways, as someone who does read a lot, honestly, this critique is warranted, in my opinion. There is a lot of yapping in Amphorius. And, I mean, admittedly, not all of it's bad, but it's definitely noticeable at some points. I know I'm sounding really negative. I really wanted to get this critique out of the way. In any case, Finan and Mighty were both pretty cool characters, although I was personally more attached to Finan and his story. Tribby was either annoying, funny, or helpful, depending on the scene. Aglaya was a character who continued to grow on me more and more as the story progressed, and Casterus, currently controversy aside, was my favorite character here. I enjoyed her a lot. Now onto the top three, and honestly, this is kind of the three I expected to be up here. It was just kind of a debate on what the order was going to be. But fittingly, at number 3, I have Volume 3 of Playing Death Games to Put Food on the Table. A light novel series that I am way too invested in, considering that it only has 3 volumes officially translated, and whilst I would love to sing the praises of the series and tell you it's perfect in hopes of getting more eyes onto it, Volume 3 was admittedly the weakest volume, in my opinion. And this is a damn shame, because a huge bulk of this volume is centered around the one game, Cloudy Beach, as opposed to the previous 2 volumes, which had 2 death games apiece. Now, mind you, I do think that shaking up the formula in this way is good. It's a way to keep the reader guessing, and it keeps the story feeling fresh. I also like the world building that was added a bit here, and seeing a surprising but familiar face from Volume 1 was really cool. I really liked the volume, but that raises the question, why is it the worst of the 3? And it's simple. Volume 1, Candlewoods, has the highest peak in the series as of now, in my opinion, and Volume 2 boasts really strong consistency throughout, as well as the best dynamic the series has brought forth as of now, being Nishiro and Yuki. Volume 3 had a pretty strong cast, but that isn't enough to outweigh the other 2 volumes, nor the other 2 entries above it on this list. Alright, it finally came out, and I sat on it for a little bit, surprisingly not getting spoiled, but I'm glad I didn't. I finally read Project Eden's Garden Chapter 1, and it's number 2 on this list. Eden's Garden is essentially a fan-made Danganronpa game. It has a pretty great quality, especially for being a passion project, and a narrative that I found to be so engaging that I ended up binging the entire chapter in one sitting, which I was not planning to do. Seriously, I was not planning on this. I find Damon to be a really refreshing protagonist, especially in comparison to Danganronpa. I think that what they do with Ava's character is pretty solid throughout. Wolfgang is a character who I didn't love in the prologue and honestly found him to be pretty okay in Chapter 1, outside of his big moment during the trial, which elevated him a little bit for me. I love Grace. She's basically my Miu Iruma of this game. She can do no wrong, she will do no wrong, she is perfect even though she literally locked me out of doing her free time events. That sucked. But because I was locked out of Grace's free time events, I got to do my backup's free time events, being Diana. And dear God, I am so glad that I did, because I think that the trial was made better because I did some of her free time events. I genuinely do not understand how this is the case, but Diana is my favorite character in Eden's Garden as of now. I thought that she was fine in the prologue, but she was not at all on my radar. Seeing her journey throughout Chapter 1 was honestly just so fucking great. I really loved her throughout the chapter. All the twists and turns surrounding her character were great, and in general, I'm looking forward to more Eden's Garden, partly just because I'm looking forward to more Diana content, whenever that may come around. I don't dislike any of the cast members, and all in all, they built up a pretty strong cast that I can really see the vision for. It's just a matter of how long are we going to be waiting in between chapters, but once Chapter 2 does drop, I will be covering it at some point. Alright, listen, I'm gonna cut this shit for a minute. I am so shocked that this ended up being my number 1 pick. It's a really good series, do not get me wrong. I mean, hell, it's better than anything we've talked about so far. But comparing this to either of my top 2 in January, let's just not. The best piece of media that I consumed in February of 2025 ends up somehow being Surviving Romance. And again, how the hell is this the top? I really liked Surviving Romance. I think the way that the series handles twists and I think the way that the series handles twists is genuinely incredible. To speak in a way that doesn't spoil, I absolutely adore the I'll love you every day reveal. I think that the way that the situation is handled is absolutely phenomenal. I think that Shiren herself is a really great protagonist, and her journey from this very arrogant loner to becoming this very selfless leader is absolutely remarkable. I like that the story doesn't just bend to her wishes. What Shiren ends up going through and experiencing is genuinely great, and I think her character has a lot of depth to it after all the reveals have come forth. Surviving Romance is a story that gets better and better as you continue through it until the very end. Alright, let's briefly talk about this. The ending to me was alright. It felt very abrupt to me, and I think it could have been executed better for sure, though I'm not super complaining about what we got. Also, the rock, paper, scissors, so that's a win. The very astute listeners will have noticed that I have not mentioned a single other character other than Shiren, and I mean, there are some solid other characters, but really, Shiren is the reason to read this, so she's the only one that's getting name dropped. Source, trust me, bro. The first half was pretty good, but the second half was really fucking good. Alright, that wraps everything up. The current plans for media are to wrap up my Mondstadt replay on Genshin. Honkai Star Rail 3.1 came out. More Olympus Company, however far I end up getting in that. More Wuthering Waves, because I'm finally picking that back up. More Honkai Impact 3rd. I'll be watching through Red vs. Blue Season 1, finally tainted. You're welcome, dude. I will finally see the Church Vision. And also Alien Stage, which is a music series, I think, on YouTube that a buddy of mine found recently, so I'm going to hop on that as well. But that's really all off of the top of my head. I think that's it. I'm sure there's more. But for now, that's all I've got, so as always, take care, y'all.